starting. I think we're live. Let me go ahead and pause myself because I watch it in the background so I don't get some feedback like last time. Here we go. Perfect. All right. I am live and rocking. We're live. I have Melissa Unfred here. I am so stoked to talk to you today. We're going to talk about all things death. And I think death is such an intriguing topic. Well, first of all, I was looking at, so I'm a bit of a procrastinator sometimes, and I was looking at your laundry list of all of the things that you have done last night. And I was just like, wow, I mean, your passion seriously radiates through when it comes to this industry and everything that you've done. So first of all, thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Of course, of course. So, death is such an intriguing topic, and I'm excited to have you on here today to talk about it because I feel like there's this weird taboo around it to where people don't really talk about it, but then at the same time, when it comes up in conversation, it's kind of like they want to talk about it. At the same time, there's this curiosity around it. It's sort of this thing where it's like, don't tell me that, but then wait, I kind of want to know more about it. When I was like 4 or 5 years old, I remember my first thoughts about death, and I was confused about it. I remember watching movies. The Land Before Time actually like absolutely fucked me up. I mean, that movie, just like with, the grandparents dying, it was like my first exposure to death. And I just, it was horrible. And I started to watch movies and I started to see death or see people in danger, see illness and things like that. And I didn't really know what to make of it. And then I started getting these weird thoughts around death and thinking like, actually want these people to die. And my parents were like freaked out, like I was going to become a serial killer or something. But I realized I think I wanted these like movie characters to die because I was just so unsettled with the concept of death. And I just kind of like wanted it to go away. I didn't want to see it or think about it. I mean, as a child, it's like your imagination, runs wild. But something that I heard in a podcast recently that fascinated me was something Socrates said. And I actually have the quote up. And he said, "To fear death, my friends, is only to think ourselves wise without being wise. For it is to think that we know what we do not know. For anything that men can tell, death may be the greatest good that can happen to them, but they fear it as if they knew quite well that it was the greatest of evils. And what is this but that shameful ignorance of thinking that we know what we do not know?" And I heard that and I was like, wow, like we have no idea what death brings, but there's this intense fear around it still. So to start out, I wanted to ask you, from being in the industry, and we'll get more into the nuts and bolts of being a mortician and all of that. But what do you think causes this fear of death in Western culture? Because it's not prevalent everywhere in the world. Other cultures celebrate it. They have different ceremonies, but it seems to be, especially in the United States, there's this fear and avoidance around death. So where do you think that that stems from?
I feel like it stems from the Civil War and our distancing ourselves from our own dead. Embalming wasn't a prevalent thing until the Civil War happened, and they were looking for a way to get Confederate and Union soldiers back home on the trains from the battlefield where they died. And so Thomas Holmes, the father of embalming, created this arsenic cocktail and started injecting it into the soldiers to preserve their bodies and set them up outside of tents and little caskets. And then later, when Abraham Lincoln was killed or assassinated, they took his body on a multi-state tour. And at every stop, they re-injected and drained the fluid that they had in the arterial system. So that became like the fly thing to do in the day, as best said by like Adam on Adam Ruins Everything. It was like the chic thing to do was to embalm your dead body.
Melissa, I don't mean to interrupt you because this is so fascinating, but you're kind of breaking up in reception.
Oh man.
So I just don't want to hinder viewers from listening to all this amazing information.
We've got really bad storms this morning, so I'm wondering if it's my internet.
So
jigging
we may
around.
just have to do the best. You're coming through great on audio. However, the video is a little bit muddled. So
Okay.
sometimes the video starts getting a little funky, and then all of a sudden the audio starts going out too.
Okay.
So if just kind of, I'll let you know if I'm not able to hear you well. But
Hmm.
if maybe if there's a better spot in the house, that's great. You can move to it, but we'll just try with this for now. I just wanted to give you
Okay.
a heads up.
Thank you. And that sucks. Sorry.
No, no
Um,
worries.
but yeah, that became the it thing to do. Families wanted uh, to put this task on someone else. So undertakers came into the home and took the dead out of the home, built cabinets, which became caskets for them. And what was something that was participated in by the family, much like a birth or a wedding, suddenly became somebody else's job. So we took death out of the home. What is now the living room was once the parlor for your dead, where you'd sit up and with the dead in your own home. So now people have taken death away, and we don't have a regular contact with it. So that's what's caused the cultural problem.
So, in people's own living rooms, there used to be like if
Mhm.
like your family member died, that would be where you would set up shop for everything before.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah,
I had
you'd
no
leave the body
idea.
there for several days until the grave was dug and until all the family came to say their goodbyes. And then the family would dig the grave and bury the body.
I see. So then it's the transition from, yeah, I've always thought it was really interesting. I mean, I get it because it's like, you know, you're working with a dead family member. So it's like, I don't expect it to hold the same weight as having a birthday party, for that family member or like a wedding or something, because it's just a
Right.
whole different ball game. But when you think about it, it is quite interesting how all other celebrations or all other events in people's lives are done there, and then it's just completely left over to another party or establishment for funerals and death. And that kind of naturally transitions us into this question or this thing we were talking about the other day, where it's like funerals are so depressing and like i I understand why it's like you can't separate the grief from that, right? It's like people are dealing with just losing a family member, just losing a loved one. Um, and it's inevitable because you're mourning. It's inevitable for the process to not be at least somewhat sad or somewhat depressing. But, I've always thought there has to be like a better way or a different way to do funerals or celebrations of life or whatever, because I remember being younger. I forget how old I was, but seeing my grandma, just the whole process. It's like I understand why my family did what way they did. My grandpa, old school, he went to the funeral home, he had it all set up, but I just remember it being like so sad and depressing. And as a younger person, I was just freaked out, like with the different events, like the wake. It's like we were all just sitting in this really stuffy room staring at her casket in the front, just her body like there. She looked not she just didn't look the same, right? It was just really weird. It was a really weird experience. And I didn't have a lot of education around death at the time. So I didn't even know what we were really doing as a kid. So I know you do a lot, which is something that fascinates me about you. You do a lot of work around restructuring the funeral process and the after death care for the family and their options. So if you want to speak more on that, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Something I've noticed in my career, I've been doing this almost 20 years now, 22. If you allow the family to have more participation in the care of their loved one, I feel like I have witnessed it facilitate the grief process better. Um, so when families call me and the death has happened, if we haven't spoken ahead of time, which unfortunately that does happen a lot, a family won't even talk to a funeral home until a death has happened, which needs to stop. Y'all need to
Mhm.
have these conversations ahead of time, whether it's with a funeral home or a death doula. But I digress. Um, having letting them know that they have time, like I'm in Austin, so we had a situation a month ago where the person died at home. on hospice care, and they were going to do a cremation following. And then everybody else was going to go back to their own towns because they weren't from here. So they were like waiting for people to drive in from Dallas and Houston. These are like several hour trips. And they were so concerned about, they had talked to other funeral homes that were going to charge them for embalming to have a viewing, or, you know, hold them like responsible for more charges to come back and see the body for a viewing the next day. I let them know they could keep the body there at the home. I would bring them ice packs if they wanted, washcloths. I mean, most people already have these tools in their home anyway. But I talked to them about the process. There's no emergency once the body is already dead. So it's getting the people in the room comfortable with the dead body in the room. So when they're talking to a funeral director or a death doula, or the person, you know, that's helping walk them through this, if you guide them with confidence and caring, they feel more confident in what they're doing, even if they've never done it before.
Do you think the delay in having these conversations until after death has to do with like a lot of the denial around death? It's almost like I know myself, um, with people or with situations, I'm one of these people that I always feel like I can fix things. And so for a lot of, you know, heavy things like illness or death, it's like I almost don't want to think that it can happen. So
Right.
then you prevent talking about it. And then when things actually do happen, like you said, you know, the conversations are delayed, and then there's so many more decisions to be made in these really heavy times of mourning, especially if people haven't really thought about it happening. So is it denial?
Yes. And just plain ignoring the elephant or the reaper in the room, you know, we are all going to die. Um, and not talking about it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's just going to put the people that are left to take care of your body in turmoil. So I do a lot of things that would spark conversation with my Instagram posts or my Facebook posts, um, to get people to talk about the uncomfortable. We have to make light of the terrifying. I mean, there's whole different ways to kind of present this to people to get them to start talking about it. It's just, how do we get out there and get people to do that?
Well, it's fascinating that it's terrifying when you really think about what Socrates said and you think about the unknown. It's terrifying because it's unknown, but it could be this amazing thing. Yet
Yeah.
we hold all these narratives around it. You know, certain movies and things don't necessarily make it always great. And not to mention, you know, my friend Mark, he's in school to be a nurse, and he's told me a few things lately where I'm just like, oh my goodness, like how death can be like he does palliative care, and the death can be like really
Oh,
painful, you know, like the active dying stages, like the agonal
yeah.
stages can be painful. And he's actually said something interesting the other day. He told me he's not scared of death, he's just scared of dying. And I think a lot of people are in that too. It's, for me, it's the transition, you know, of our consciousness and everything, um that's about. It's just, it's unknown. And then you see this rise in artificial intelligence right now. And I saw something, I was reading the book Sapiens, and something
Hmm.
that like there's projections that we may be able to be amortal by the year 2050. And what that means is that it's, we're not going to be immortal because we can still die, you know, via tragic accident or some sort of, you know, something outside that's unexpected, an accident, but we will be able to replace our organs with synthetic, you know, robotic material, if you will,
Ew.
to become amortal. So if you sit in your house forever, you will be able to live. And when you think about that, it's how much anxiety would that give people if it's like, I can never die, but I basically can never leave my house because the only way that I'll die is by an accident. So how many
Hmm.
agoraphobics would you start to have? And
Right.
just, I mean, to me, it's like that feels so unnatural, but there are people out there creating it because there's a need for it. People don't want to die. They don't want to think about it or face it.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I,
It, it's just weird. It's weird for me. Not necessarily bad. I just don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of Because I'm really scared. I mean, I'm scared of death. I'll be real. I had like a fainting episode years ago. I talk about it all the time, and I'm actually getting quite exhausted talking about it. So I don't want to spend too much time. It's one of these things that kind of shape my life. So it's inevitable. It kind of just comes up for me. But that loss of consciousness really kind of shook me, because it was the first exposure I really had to my body acting in a way that I couldn't control, kind of
Yeah.
gave life to that whole experience. So it's something that I think about a lot. And it's something that I think about, but then I almost like make myself not think about, because it gets too intense and it gets too scary. So you're around it all the time. I
Right.
mean, you're around, like, you're on call. You told me last time we talked.
Mhm.
So what made you want to be a mortician? Because to me, like, any of those kind of weird, quirky professions, I've always thought it takes an interesting soul to want to do this. So what motivated you or inspired you to pursue this?
There's an interesting backstory. So it was right before my senior year of high school. Um, a local news channel was interviewing family-owned businesses that were looking for help for the summer. And after a plumber was a funeral home, and they were interviewing a woman. And I mean, that was, even I had been to several funerals, before high school, and had not run into a woman running a funeral home. So I was, enchanted by that. But my mom from the kitchen looks over and thinks, funeral home, daughter wearing black clothes. Oh, hey, that's the best job for you this summer, huh? And I was like, I bet. So I got the job because the lady happened to know my grandfather. So I worked at that funeral home for the summer in Lubbock, Texas, and was introduced to a very compassionate front end and a very interesting back end. The back end was everything that went on behind the closed doors, the smoke and the mirrors of getting a body ready. I mean, this was back in the day when they thought that to clear jaundice out of the arterial system, you flushed Eagle brand milk through the embalming machine before the embalming fluid. I mean, I've seen some weird stuff, but
Oh, yeah. I mean, I
so
don't know
gross.
the industry, because I don't really know how weird that is, but just
That's
the thought of
hilarious.
flushing milk through your system just doesn't, I mean, it just doesn't sound very good. So,
No, it comes out looking unappetizingly like chunky strawberry milk, but yeah.
oh gosh.
So I mean,
Good
it was
morning,
more or
everybody.
less. It's kind of like I was seeing the bodies come in sick and frail, and seeing the mastery that was going on behind the closed doors of putting color back into somebody's skin again and filling out their face with tissue builders and wax and all these things and cosmetics to make them look like they were alive. In my later years, I remember, you mean, I've always remembered the first time I saw my great grandparents in a casket, and it was at a corporate funeral home when I was very young, like probably eye level to their nose when they're laying in the casket. And I was always so convinced that I could see them breathing because they looked so alive. And later, after, kind of putting two and two together, I read an article about a woman who said she felt like the embalming process actually harmed her, seeing her mother go from very sick and frail, where they had just been dealing with this for years and years, to suddenly walking in a room and looking like she was going to stand up off the table and take you to tea. Um,
Wow.
so yeah. So it was initially, I was in love with the restoration part, but then began to distance myself from it as I learned more about it and begin to experience symptoms from being around embalming fluid. Like when I first entered the industry in 2000, or school in 2001, I went to mortuary school first, and then again later in 2012. But like the chemicals and everything that's involved, um, doesn't matter how much protective equipment you wear, eventually it will begin to take a toll on your body. And I was able to smell it through the gear and everything that we would wear, whether it was in school or if it was doing our casework for school at a local funeral home. Um, So I started educating myself when I got into my apprenticeship outside of school, just outside of 2012. And there wasn't a lot of activity about green burial then, but there was just enough where there were people on the internet talking about it, and that kind of spread from there. So most of us early on gathered our knowledge from other people in other areas of the country that were already doing natural burials and foregoing embalming.
So you were initially interested in the embalming because it brought so much life from these sick, frail people. It made them look like they were alive, right? But then the embalming got you sick. Is that
Yes.
right? Like, what kind of
Yes.
symptoms would you go through? Like, what were you feeling? Was it like a day-to-day thing outside of when you were around the fluid? Was it just when you were around the fluid?
It would drag on. If I had been in a room embalming for some time, for days afterwards, I would have a persistent headache. Dizzy spells would come up. Those are what I remember the most, that I associate back with embalming, because the headache stopped after I stopped going in the prep room.
So the significance of seeing the body after death, is that a closure thing? You know, because I know that some people don't want to see the body, and then for other people
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's kind of a good thing, because I'm just thinking about the different options, and we can probably go into the different options of what you can do. You know, some people are cremated, some people like to have the body, you know, preserved and restored right there. We can talk about, I'm excited to talk about becoming a tree because that's
Um,
something that I've heard about, and I saw your notes on that, so I'm curious to hear. But yeah, why even have the body? Just closure?
um, it definitely helps. Yeah, closure. And we don't have to have an embalmed body to get that closure. It's just like I said, feeling comfortable about being around the body after death until you're ready to let go and ready for that other person to step in and take the body to refrigeration or, whatever the next step is. Um,
So going into the green burial, is that, or the green process, is that I think that's where you were headed. Is that another option? Because I'm wondering, if you don't embalm, I mean, how can you get the body to look presentable in a way that, you know, people wouldn't freak out, you know, seeing their
they
loved one
don't.
like already deteriorated?
Well, you've been with them through this process where they're dying anyway. What's another day? They're not going to look that much freakish 3 hours after they die. If anything, they'll probably look a lot more at peace. An unembalmed body doesn't have its mouth shut or its eyes. If you were to imagine you falling asleep in a rocking chair or something, when you kind of just like, it's like slack jaw,
Yeah. Well, and
slack
that,
jaw, eyes
you
ever
know,
so slightly open.
that speaks to it's the natural process, right? You know, when what I think about when I'm hearing you talk about this is that the embalming process, in a way, not, I don't want to talk shit about it, but it's a way to kind of bring the person closer to life, almost, I don't want to call it denial, but it's like you're still kind of avoiding the natural process of death. It's like, I feel like maybe seeing your loved one in the state that they're in would help to realize, like, this is a natural process of life, and maybe make it a little bit less scary because
Yeah,
you're not really fucking with it.
yeah, yeah. Um, there are some great mentors to me and others in the industry that have been doing this, and on a grander scale, like Amy Cunningham of Fitting Tribute Funerals in New York. She's phenomenal. Shar Barrett with A Sacred Moment in Snohomish, Washington. Um, Lucinda Herring in Colorado. And I'm missing so many more, but these women have kind of set the standard for this kind of death care. And they're brilliant at it. And it's like trickle down into, finally, through younger women like myself. I mean, I'm not that young, I'm 40, but like we're reaching a bigger audience, thanks to the knowledge that's been passed down from these other women. And we're able to tell people, this is how we can do it now. We don't have to involve these chemicals. They actually came out with an embalming line of natural oils and elements, that's supposed to be a green embalming. But honestly, I don't see the point in either, since it costs more money. But if a family wanted it, we'd find a way to make it happen. Uh, the natural burial isn't the only disposition that you can come to by choosing not to embalm. A family can do cremation, and tell them, well, let's embalm the body first so you can have the viewing. And for some families, that's what they wanted, but many of them are going in there like, that is not what my loved one wanted. They just wanted to be direct cremated. And then you get another person in the room that's like, oh, but so-and-so hasn't seen them, and it's not like this all the time, and they wouldn't understand. And that's why, again, we harken back to have these discussions beforehand and have things in writing, because emotions can take over and families get in that little room with a funeral director sometimes, and they'll make a lot of decisions that they necessarily wouldn't have made in the heat of the moment.
Makes me think of my wedding.
I kind of just,
Makes,
oh no.
just like I mean, yeah, that's a whole story for a whole different story for another day. But there's so many opinions is kind of what I was going for. There's so many different opinions from everybody other than, the bride and the groom. And as silly as it sounds, it's like, and their parents, there's so many different opinions. And it's really hard to please everybody. And I feel like not even just with weddings and funerals, but with so many decisions in life, it's like we don't always put ourselves first. We want to consider every other person, but if you consider 100 other perspectives, it's like you're going to drive yourself into the ground with stress. No pun intended there.
Yeah.
And it's impossible. And you and I talked on our little pre-call about the funeral homes. It's, you speak of all this great information. You said other people are on board too, but is it just tradition? Like, why aren't more people getting on board with these ways of care? Is it just like, maybe the older generation stuck in their ways? It's just how things have always been since the Civil War, like you're saying?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to tell you the tea. It's the old, non-retired funeral people in this industry that will not let it go. They're not open to new ideas. They are set in their ways. This is how it's going to go. This is how every funeral has been. I've worked for these people before. I'm in a Facebook group with other women in the funeral industry that work for these men. A lot of them are men still, 80-year-old men holding on behind the desk with their cigar, waiting for that next paycheck or that next check from a family. And it's a prescription. It's like, family comes in, they make arrangements. We're going to set the visitation for 2 days from now. The next day is the burial in the morning, and we're going to have our chapel service so everybody can see our glorious chapel and event center at our funeral home. And then we're going to go in our nice little rented hearse down the street with lights and sirens going. I'm going to make sure we put our funeral home name on the side of the hearse so everybody knows who we're with, because we got to advertise, right? And then get to the cemetery and pass out a bunch of little bottles of water again with your funeral home logo on it. So everybody is sure to know which funeral home was taking care of this family, because how else do you market in the funeral industry? It kind of comes down to that.
No, that's trippy.
They are set in their
Why are
ways,
you advertising so much? I think about the same thing with hospitals.
Yeah.
Like when you drive down the street and there's a huge billboard like John Muir Health, like we love you, come to us. And it's like, okay, you shouldn't want people to come to you. We should be talking more about, like it's a little bit different, more of the preventative care. Like let's make it a goal for people to not come to you, not have a huge billboard on the side of the road like come to us, no Kaiser, come to us, no, this hospital, come to us. It's weird. And it's the same thing with a funeral home, when you think about advertising, it's like it's a business, and it's a really trippy thing to mix in business and death, because
Yeah.
and it's the same. I've heard a lot of people talk about the same thing with, this is kind of side, but like veterinarians. It's like veterinarians can oftentimes I won't call it exploit people, but you're dealing with a very sensitive issue when pets are really sick and there's not a lot of veterinarians, and then you can just pay whatever you want and listen to them because there's nowhere else to really go. And people
Yeah.
have the same thoughts, I think, with death. It's like no one talks
Death and
about this, like you
hospitals.
said. And
Yeah.
and hospitals, yeah, no one talks about this stuff. No one really
Right.
knows. So you have to defer to the experts in
Yeah.
the field or in the industry, and then you have no choice. And then especially when you're in a vulnerable state, when your loved one is sick, when your pet is sick, when someone's died, when you're grieving, you can't make decisions. Your mind isn't really there, so you're going to defer to the person in front of you and listen to them. And um it makes me feel some weird things, how when anyone's stuck in their ways and won't listen to another option, I red flag that. It just doesn't. I don't know. We got to grow. We got to
Yeah.
expand. We have times change, and we need to change with them. So I think it starts with, like you were saying, these conversations, talking about them, letting people understand what their actual options are after death, because maybe then if we actually had a conversation and understood this is what could happen or this is what can happen, I have this choice, it's not scary to talk about right now, it people wouldn't be so afraid of it.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. There are games out there now. My favorite being Morbid Curiosity. They have a website, morbidcuriositygame.com. But they have like not paid sponsorship. I love the game that much. Like they have cards that have questions, and it starts a great table conversation where you can invite your friends or your family over and like have a bottle of wine and talk about death, the humor side and the scary side. So there are great tools that are out there. Another one that I really like is a Mortician's Tale. It kind of gives you a peek behind the scenes. It's available on the Apple apps and
Is that a
on
book?
Steam. Oh no, it's a game.
Oh, it's a game.
It is
Okay.
a game by Laundry Bear Games, and if you make it until the end and you see the credits, my name's there, and so is Kermit
Oh,
the dog.
hey,
She
Kermit.
the Yeah, the creator used to watch our Instagram stories back in 2017, and she added the entire component about cremation from watching me do cremations at night. So, I mean, those are great examples of tools that are out there to help, people. And then, like you were talking about your friend that's in palliative care, I just saw a great documentary at Hospice Austin the other day called Being Mortal. There's a book and a documentary. So if you Google Being Mortal documentary online, it comes up on Frontline and it's phenomenal. I sat there for an hour and watched doctors, palliative care doctors, tippy toe around talking about death with their terminal patients until their patients were right up here. And then let's just get you comfortable. And there's no time to do what you want to do in this
Mm-hmm.
because you can't do anything anymore. You're exhausted and you're dying. So
Yeah.
they fought and fought and fought and fought up until the last minute and made themselves so sick they didn't enjoy what time they had left because the doctor couldn't just come out and say, I think we need to stop doing this to you.
Yeah,
There's no other option.
I knew somebody who knew somebody that was dying of cancer, and I worked with her, and I was asking her questions like, how is she taking it? Because she was young. I think she was in her 40s. She was dying of, I think, breast cancer. And I was asking her, like, how is she dealing with this? And she's just like, God, she's so anxious. She doesn't want, to leave her kids behind. And she's, when I see her, she just has so much anxiety and she doesn't know what to make of it. And it's like, I'm thinking about it, and how tragic is that? This poor
Yeah.
woman is dying. Her body is going through, enough physiologically dying.
Yeah.
But not only that, she's confused, like out of her mind mentally about what's even happening to her. And it's just
Right.
all those things going on at once to end your life that way. It just doesn't seem right to me,
Yeah.
without having these conversations. So my question for you is, after death, Right now, see, from what I know, from where I stand, the only option I feel like I have, and this isn't true, but just from a state of ignorance, is either I can be cremated, which is my body's thrown into a pit of fire. I can be buried into the ground, and you have to go through a funeral home. That's like my ignorant consumer's mindset. So if you want to just change my mind on that, I would love I would love to hear it, because I know there's so many more options, and you can speak
Right.
on the tree and donating your body to science, because I am very interested in that.
Yeah, I was too until I dug up some dirt. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh goodness. Okay.
So there is flame cremation, but now there's also water cremation. Water cremation is also known as alkaline hydrolysis, or aquamation, and it is 90% um, less energy used in the process of the cremation. Um, no carbon emissions at all. It's a mixture of 95% water and then 5% lye, which is found in soap, or for those Breaking Bad fans, yeah, same stuff.
I actually never
But
watched
not
it,
on
but
a
like my
gross.
whole family has watched it. So I'm like I'm the one out. So if they're listening right now, I'm sure they understand what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, I've had a lot of people bring up the baking bad Breaking Bad reference lately, so I'm just going to go with it. It's like one last spa day for your dead body. With the water that comes into the tank and washes over your body, all your proteins disintegrate. So that's your hair and your skin and your muscles, and then what's left is shiny white bone. And then the bone, just like with flame cremation, because after the burning and the emissions and the mercury that goes into the air with flame cremation, you are left with bones, but they're chunky and gray. Sometimes they have commingling from whoever was in there before. All that is scraped out, processed up, and then the family is given back cremated remains. But with the water, they're like white and powdery remains. With the flame, it's sometimes a little bit more coarse and chunky, kind of like kitty litter. It's just the result of the texture at the end of the process. Some people don't care what it looks like, but some people want to incorporate that into like memorial jewelry or glass orbs or something like that, for memorial keepsakes, and they do care what the end product result looks like, besides the fact that they care that water cremation is so much more environmentally friendly and gentler of a process. It actually completes the circle of life, whereas flame cremation kind of ends that. When your body is like disintegrating into the air and burning, that's the end. But with water cremation, you have the opportunity to take that liquid that's left, the effluent, which is not a sludge. It's like a light brown colored liquid, and it can be spread into like a pasture or maybe into the forest or on land. We're looking to do that here in Texas. We want to complete the circle of life and spread that effluent like into our agricultural community. So people can really continue on, if they're choosing not to be buried. So that's the difference between the flame and the water cremation.
Well, I've never heard of water cremation, so that's really cool. I can't say that if I'm visualizing my body going into like a furnace or being like submerged underwater, that either really sounds great to like my conscious mind right now. But I think if I had to pick, the water definitely sounds and feels more peaceful. I mean, not that I would be alive to really have an opinion about it at that time, but the water, I mean, even the fact that it gives you the shiny, like the way you described it, the shiny white bones and the nice kind of fresh white powder. I don't know, it feels clean to me.
Yeah.
It feels like an improvement over the the fire. So how widely known is this water cremation? Is this new?
It's not. It's not new. It's been available for the public since 2011. Mostly, it's been used in medical schools, for bodies that were donated. Like we have one in Dallas at the Health Science Center there for donor bodies, but yet our humans can't have it in Texas. So it's currently legal in 19 of the 50 states. And what it comes down to is the definition of cremation needs to include or water. So reduction of the body by fire or water. In most cases, it's as simple as that.
So it's two words that is
Yeah, yeah,
keeping
yeah.
society behind from this. Wow.
And I've
That's
learned so much about government just being involved in this. Like nothing in school prepared me for the shenanigans that are going on at the Capitol, even in the state of Texas. Well, every state is going to be like that. Like, okay, lobbyists have to be paid money in order to go schmooze the people that pass bills. Like, this is like, I'm going to say it's seedy and underground because it is. As somebody from the outside that did not grow up in politics, I am blown away by how shady and seedy our government runs. Like,
well, you said you've been starting to do some like grassroots campaigning and stuff around this, right? I mean,
yeah,
this is recently.
yeah, we are fighting to get water cremation legalized in Texas. I'm already offering it to families thanks to a partnership that we have with Hughes Flameless Cremation in St. Louis, Missouri. For the families here in Texas that elect for that service, they go on a plane. The body goes on a plane to St. Louis, Missouri right now. But it's still carbon neutral because the plane was already going to be flying there anyway. But it's still, why? We could do it here. So it comes down to like, there's funeral directors associations involved sometimes. There's the general public, like the Catholics are upset about water cremation because they say that it's separating the body. You're okay with flame, but now you're not
Wait,
okay with
that makes
water?
absolutely no sense. They're okay with
Right.
flame, but they say that the water cremation I mean, is that even true? Separates the body? What does that even mean?
When you have all the tissue particles, the proteins that become water, and then your bones, that's separate. And at some facilities, the water goes down the drain, just like any other of your body fluids would.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want that to happen. Our answer to that is to incorporate the effluent, which is the liquid, back into the circle of life, like on a ranch or something like that. But you can't explain that to people
Well,
unless you have a
how
platform.
about they have a choice about what happens to their loved ones, and then they
Yeah,
give everybody else the option, because you can't sit here and say, just because I don't want something, then no one else should get it.
right.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Um,
Thank you.
it at all. But
Right.
so there's no other reason why this water cremation would be banned or not legal anywhere, but just the fact that you need to change legislation. You need to add the two words. That's really it.
Yeah, that.
Wow.
Or just add the ability to perform alkaline hydrolysis by the funeral professionals. Yeah. And then, I mean, from there, not all of us are going to be doing it. Those tanks are very expensive pieces of machines. And I think that's a lot of the pushback from the funeral industry. In fact, I'm confident that that is a lot of the pushback in the funeral industry towards change, because they don't want to invest in new technology. They're all happy spending, $500,000 on their flame cremation machines that they have to re-brick every couple of years. They just now adopted all of that technology, and now they don't want to go into something even newer.
Well,
So,
I think as
I
the
mean,
as our the younger generation kind of steps in, especially since you said the water cremation is environmentally friendly. I mean,
yeah,
by a significant amount. I think you said like 90. It saves 90%. Right, or what,
mhm,
90% of what? Energy
energy
reduction.
reduction.
So I mean, I just think it's these people stuck in their ways that need to go through their own services, and then
Yeah.
then we can transition. So
She means die. Would you die
yeah,
already? No,
seriously. Thank you. I was just beating around the bush there,
I'm gonna say
sugarcoating
it.
things. So just say it. If anybody can say it, you can say it. But so this whole idea of becoming a tree, and donating your body to science. See, that's something that I have heard on a very high level. Of you just hear, like, I actually was in school to be a nurse, so I've seen a cadaver, and like it's kind of trippy because I saw him and they're like talking about him, like, oh, he was a 93-year-old man and he lived. And I'm like, like I still was like,
Aw.
don't tell me about that, because I see this.
Aw.
It was trippy. I'm not you.
Yeah.
So but Um, what is the like actual information around that people should know? Like, is donating your body to science a good thing? Can you become a tree, or any other kind of weird things that people may share about your body after death? What's legit and what isn't?
All right, I'm going to start with one you didn't mention because I just got this notification last night that Luke Perry was wrapped in a mushroom burial shroud and buried on his ranch in Tennessee. Except for the fact that the mushroom burial shroud is bogus. I did a test burial with the creator J. Rim Lee at Eloise Woods in Austin, Texas. And she flew in and we shrouded the body together in her fabric that was infused with mushroom spores. We had a university student, research student at UT, put PVC pipe in the ground so that they could run a camera down there and take soil samples because they wanted to prove that mushrooms would grow on your body and make the soil more viable than when you had been buried.
So,
So,
so to interject real quick, so a mushroom shroud, or what you're saying, so that's like basically, I'm envisioning this like blanket or mesh kind of with mushrooms all over it, and your body's
no,
just wrapped in it.
mushroom spores.
Oh,
The idea
spores.
was when she did the testing in her home, mushrooms grew in a terrarium on her fingernail and hair clipping. So she was like, oh, it's going to work in the ground too. Unfortunately, it did not. But yet, this is one of many products that is peddled to the grieving community that does nothing. The next one, well, it's great. Let's say it's great that Luke Perry was naturally buried, but I really feel that needs to be the story about this and not the mushroom burial shroud, because that's a $2,500 piece of fabric that smells like a pizza. That's all it is.
So it doesn't work, you're saying?
No, no,
And
there's
why?
no scientific proof at all that it does exactly what it claims to. It failed here in Texas, and I can only assume that it's failing everywhere else.
So the idea is that where you're buried, there's supposed to be mushrooms that are sprouting up front, like eventually from where you're buried. Is that?
No, under the ground on your body. So that's why they ran the camera into the ground so they could see if this was
Oh,
happening, and it wasn't.
and then the goal of this is to make the soil better
Like
than
in
when.
case like in case somebody was taking, chemotherapy medication at the end of life, you don't want that to get into the ground. You kind of wanted the mushrooms to eat those toxicities.
Ah, I see. So it's okay. I gotcha. So it's
Yeah,
like preserving the area around your body and making it more, the soil more nutritious, and so you're not like leaking toxins into the earth.
right, right.
Okay, but there's no proof that works. Okay, so we're debunking that for now.
Yeah. The next one is going to be the tree. Um, Earlier in my career, when the first tree urns came out, they say, you put cremated remains in there and then the little sapling's going to sprout. I had two families come back to me within a week, both of them crying because the tree sprouted and then the cremated remains promptly killed it. So there's a story on my Instagram about a girl that had her dad's cremated remains in the closet. And because they had opened them every now and then to scoop some out and go spread, it was getting moisture in the air in the box. And one day she went to go get some out, and her dad became Brick Dad. So there's a story about Brick Dad. It's
Brick
like
dad.
we go back, yeah, Brick Dad. We go back, and
I
it's like
like that. I mean,
hard as a
I like
rock.
the way that sounds for some reason. So he
It's
became like
a
a solid
cute
piece, like
story.
it's like a brick, like a solid
Yeah,
piece of
yeah,
cremated
like they
remains.
chisel him off now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
You could
So,
actually,
and
you
that
could
same
make
thing
you
happens.
could make that in, like, you could get that piece like carved into something I
It
mean, if
doesn't work that well.
no, okay. I figured I'd give it a
It's
try.
not that good. No.
So the tree doesn't work just historically, you're
Yeah,
saying, from
it's
what
just
you've
enough to kill
seen.
your plants.
Gosh, I mean, does it work for some people? Like for some.
Now, well, there's a new product now. Passages International out of New Mexico is working with it, and they have one in their office that is actually sprouting. So I've asked them to keep me informed of how that's going. So hopefully theirs will work and I'll be able to present something to families that I feel confident in. But right now it's a bogus product. But if you want to be a tree, here's how you achieve that. I have answers for everything.
You do.
Natural burial. You put your body in the ground. And of course, during the decomposition process, it's going to heat the ground up. Have you ever experienced composting, like a composting pile or anything?
We do compost, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
really like, I
You
don't
kind
mindfully pay attention.
of churn it. It kind of gets all heated up in there and you churn it and stuff. There is a new technology or a new process coming out that just got through almost all the way through Washington. When they're legalizing their water cremation, they had another bill hanging out with it, for human composting. They call it recomposition. It's by Katrina Spade, and that is what I have elected to do for myself when I die. If it's not available in Texas yet, I want to be flown to Washington to be put in a honeycomb tube and turned with soil, and your body becomes soil. And you can literally nourish plant life or a tree that way.
That is
So that's
cool.
something new that's coming.
That is
Mm-hmm.
cool. I need to start thinking about what I
Yeah.
want. I don't want to talk about what I want to do with myself when I die, because I feel like if I do, I'm just gonna like give the universe permission to kill me. It's such a twisted,
Yeah.
like
No.
wrong way of thinking, but it's like
Stop.
I
Stop.
refuse.
No.
I refuse to think about this. But that's
See,
really
you're part of the problem.
I know, right? I know. I'm learning today. I am part of the problem.
Yeah.
I like that. That's cool. Because I haven't thought about why did you elect to do that? Like, what was it? Just, do you feel like that's the best option for, I guess, energy? You know, like they say, like your body, it's just everything goes back into everything, right? Just keep on continuing the
Yeah.
cycle.
Um, the appeal to me came because I initially wanted natural burial. When I discovered Eloise Woods Natural Burial Park, I wanted to be buried beneath the trees in a bed of flower petals wrapped in, a cotton sheet, you know. Um, but what I've discovered over burial spots during, my lifetime, as I sit back and riff, I mean, like right now, that park is going through management change and they're not allowing people to be buried there for whatever reason. That's turmoil and future things that I can't control. Just like, they're building a highway on 183 near the airport and they're divvying the highway to go around 3 graves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you think those people in the pioneer days expected to be buried in the middle of a freaking highway? No. Like, these are things that I shouldn't care about, but I do because this is the line of work that I'm in. So I want to be nothing.
Well, that's a good
I just
point,
want to be nothing.
because you can make a decision. Like I could make a decision now, but it's like, what if I die when I'm like 110? Be optimistic. That's, a long
Yeah,
time.
you may change
I
your
not only
mind.
may I change my mind, but it's like maybe the circumstances or the options may change.
Technology.
Technology may change, and
Hmm.
I think that actually speaks to a great point that we should probably always be thinking about this. Maybe every certain amount of years,
Yeah.
it's like you are in the industry, so you stay up to date with everything, but nobody else really knows what their options are.
Yeah.
So like I told you, I just was like, oh, I can be cremated or I can be buried. I had no idea I could be turned into soil. It's freaking awesome. That you can be, and
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
soil, does it just get shipped back to your loved ones and then they can do whatever they want with it?
You can find out more at recompose.life. But the concept is that the soil can be given back to the family or used in a community setting in some way, like a garden or, grow vegetables, different things like that,
Oh, that's trippy.
playgrounds.
You plant your, like, your friend and you eat vegetables from from the soil. It's like a weird version of cannibalism. Not really, but
Yeah, no, not really. Don't do that.
I know my mind's sick. It just goes there. Um,
But everybody's mind goes there and it's okay. It's just you're making light of the situation. It makes people more comfortable.
totally. You're donating your body to science. Not a good idea because you have dug something up before. I want to hear about
Yeah.
this.
All right. So I'm all about getting people a free cremation. And if it comes to that, I think that families, again, should decide what's best for them. There is a book out called The Red Market kit that I just recently devoured. I had reached out to a couple of body donation places on the West Coast that I was interested in partnering with to be able to provide their services for families in Texas. And I'm still grappling with it. I mean, I'm okay with providing service, but what families need to do is know what they're doing when they decide this option. The human body through a body donation facility, now not medical donation, but like a body donation, can make anywhere from 25,000 to $75,000 per body. They send off your different parts. Sometimes it's like a body broker, like this medical school needs a brain, well this one needs an arm, and this one needs some stuff. You may go different places.
Ooh, I don't know about
Something,
that.
if people are okay with it, families don't get the money is my big heartbreak. I'm like, if they're making that much bank, all the family is getting is a free $700 cremation.
Well, and I can't imagine that every single facility that takes in these bodies and every single person is like handling the body in necessarily an ethical way. It's like when I'm envisioning it being like chopped up and organs going everywhere, it just, I don't know. It's something about it's not settling to me. The thought of like you being passed around in all these hands and just kind of like chopped up, and I don't know. I guess I just don't trust people enough to handle me
Yeah.
in the way that I would want to be handled, but maybe that just speaks to my trust issues.
Yeah. True. I just think it comes down to like people should research the company that they're opting to go with before and make sure they're comfortable with what happens. As an alternative, I would suggest donating your body to a school, like a medical school or a science school. San Marcos has a body farm just south of Austin, like an hour. And they take the bodies that are donated and place them to decompose in natural settings in nature so they can see the decomposition process, and it helps them with forensics and different things of that nature. So I think a program like that would be phenomenal. But it really comes down to what are you and your family most comfortable with, or really what are you most comfortable with, and go that direction.
Well, it's understanding, like you said, what happens to your body, what actually happens to your body, not just the very high level thought of like, oh, it's just going to science. Cool. Oh, this company, cool. Here you go. It's like, no, it's your body's going to go through these stages, through these hands. You may be, this may happen. You're going to be in this field or you won't, or, all those things. So it's just doing proper research then if you're interested in donating your body to science and finding the right company.
Right. Yeah, and definitely don't wait until the person's already dead, because in most cases, without prior medical history, they will reject the body.
How much
So
do you
don't
see
have that be your backup.
often? It's a really weird way to start that question. How often do you see families after the fact, when their loved ones have died, having to make decisions for their loved ones? And how often do you see the opposite? So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how often does the person come in prepared with, this is everything that I want to happen to me after I die, before death?
Um, mm, my personal experience would probably be about 60-40 right now, with 60 not having any clue what they're doing. I've worked for
Wow.
a mortuary removal service in the past that would pick up for multiple funeral homes, and you'd get there and the family would be just like, I called the first person on this list and I didn't know what I was doing, and we don't know what we want, and that happens so often. Families are stuck in a situation where they're at the hospital, the person is actively dying, but they're still holding out hope. And then the chaplain walks in and hands them a list of funeral home names with prices on it, and it's overwhelming. And they're just like, what do we do? So, I mean, I'm thankfully hearing from a lot of people my age and younger that they are talking about this and having plans for this, and that they're encouraging their boomer parents to do the same. The boomers are going to change the death industry completely. Like already, we're gearing towards the celebrations of life, the direct cremations, and then the families taking over the celebrations. Or like in the state of Texas, you're not even required to hire a funeral director. Now, that's not in every state, but families could literally do it from beginning to end if they're doing burial on their property on their own.
So
But again,
you're
hard.
required in some states to hire a funeral director. Like there's no other option.
Correct.
Oh, so there's no way to even get around it. I mean,
Right.
it's like you have to. Wow, I had no idea. You told me that you've seen some very unique celebrations of life. So, do you have examples? I mean, I think it's great for people to hear um all the different things that you can do, because I think so much in life we are scared to be different because you just kind of want to go along with the crowd. And it's like, you don't want to be like shamed or judged for like
Oh yeah.
having a celebration of life. Like you said, one of them at a brewery. It's like nobody wants to be different. But then when you hear that other people are doing it, it sort of gives you that green light to be like, this is okay. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
weird. This is right. Like, this is okay for me to do. So what are some cool,
Uh,
different,
yeah.
different things you've seen?
I heard a story last week, actually, about a lady and her friends. One of them had died, and so they took her urn. They had a little mini urn that they took with them on their vacations for the years to come, and they made the urn outfits. Like the urn had a two-piece bathing suit that they took when they went to the Bahamas. The urn had like, I don't know, I think there was like a cowboy outfit when they went to Arizona or something. Like, that's one thing. I've had a memorial service or celebration of life with an urn present. And yes, I did carry a TV screen there too, at a zoo.
Wow.
So that was very interesting. The brewery was a great one too. They had his urn at the head of the table with an urn wreath around it. And then rounds were on the house for the people that were in that room. And they played a video and they each did a toast. It was amazing. It's like, I mean, even a couple of days ago, I was talking to a lady on the phone and she was like, I want to do this thing at home where everybody's in our backyard, but his mom wouldn't understand. And I'm like, who's paying for the funeral?
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Let her do her own thing. She can, if she wants to have a church memorial service with an urn presence, send
Well,
her on her way.
and you got to think, I think a lot of people are so stuck in the idea of something. So the idea maybe of like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. But then I feel like most people, if you're doing things in the right way with the right intention and the right heart, it's like they come around, they warm up to
Yeah.
it. It's like you got to think, you know, something may sound ridiculous to maybe someone older, like you're saying her mom, but or his mom
Uh-huh.
or his mom, but it's like in the moment, I think a lot of people come around. It's just kind of taking the plunge and saying, standing your ground, like no, and not to mention what would make it so much easier for everybody is when the person is alive, they just like you said talked about it, wrote it down. So after the fact, it's like no one can even argue about it. It's like this person wrote it down, they said what they wanted, period. Now shut up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Follow the rules on the paper. Yeah. That's why it's really
Exactly.
important for people maybe that don't have a next of kin to be proactive and assign an appointment of agent. Like I don't trust my family to dispose of my body the way that I want to. So I assigned an appointment of agent over to my friend, and she has directions on what to do if I die and knows to take care of my dog a certain way. Um, and it's as easy as like going on my website under resources and just printing an appointment of agent. You don't have to have a notary. It is legal in any of the states. It's better if you have a notary, but you can usually just have several witnesses. And this is designating somebody to be in control of your body if you die. That way, your next of kin doesn't take over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just envisioning it's an interesting process to think about sitting down and thinking about what you want to happen to you when you die, because then because I'm envisioning right now, I'm envisioning myself, because it's like this conversation is sparking something in me like maybe I should actually sit here and think about this, because you never know when your time is, right? but then but
Yeah.
then you got to sit down and face the fact that you're going to die. And I think so many of us, and myself included, I've like got into this weird loop of like change the way I eat in recent years. And so I'm like, I'm going to live forever, which is clearly not true. But I think I still hold on to that weird fantasy of mine of trying to prolong it. But it's just sitting there and actually facing like, oh gosh, like I have to envision myself like dead. Just really, it's really hard to do and really get your mind in that. I mean, for you, somebody that works around dead people, I mean, was it hard for you in the beginning to, I mean, is it still hard how do you manage the emotions around that? Because I worked in the hospital and I was seeing people dying and a lot of crazy things going on with their body and their mind. And I had, this lady with sepsis, she like grabbed my arm and she's like, I don't want to die. Or no, she said, I want to die. Please kill me. This hurts. And I was just like, it was hard. And this other man who was like, he could never walk again. And he's like, I'm never going to be able to go fishing with my son again. So get out there and live your life. And I was just like, I was kind of like half inspired by these stories and half freaked the hell out. Like, I'm not prepared for this. Like, oh my goodness. So that in and of itself was challenging for me, but you actually work on the other side of the line when people have been dead. So how do you, I mean, from the start of the profession to now, how do you deal with that?
I have a dog.
You have a dog.
I have
Dogs are
a
awesome.
cheap stick. Yeah. Really, I don't know. For me, it kind of became like I am the lighthouse in the storm. Look to the funeral director to be the guide. To kind of disconnect a bit because it's not your person either. But I'm also empathetic enough to be able to adjust to the situation in the room and the temperature of the people. Some of us, it's just natural to flow into that caretaker position and guide people through. But there have been a lot of cases that affected me after hours. I mean, we're human. So 2016 is when I adopted Kermit. And it wasn't just my career that I was struggling with at the time. It was not being accepted in my career. I was just starting to get my voice and speak out about the dangerous practices of embalming and my personal opinions on the practice and the future of death care. I was getting a lot of pushback from colleagues and people that I, had worked around, and it was very stressful. Plus, like there were some life changes happening. So I found Kermit and immediately adopted him. He was 4 months old. He was at a shelter, and he came home and immediately became my sidekick. We went through therapy dog training, and he became the first certified therapy dog in death care. And so now between him and my therapist, I'm functioning pretty fairly well.
That's awesome. I think that I think that being in a caretaker role, because I found myself in a lot of different caretaker roles, even when I'm not in a profession that's a caretaker. I just kind of naturally am a caretaker. I think for my tribe, I just always like try to make sure everybody's okay and solve problems. And, that's where I actually perform. I actually thrive doing that. I think my personality is just aligns with that. But I think the issue is that I find for myself is like, you're so well in that high stakes, grieving trauma. I mean, like I perform well, but then it's like, how do you deal after it kind of rolls away and then you're sitting by yourself? I mean, I haven't found a perfect solution for that because it's challenging, because I think when you're in the moment and performing, at least for me, you're not really processing a lot of what's going on. You're just kind of like, okay, what do I need to do to be there for these people? How can I make these people? It's almost like more of a focus on someone else. And then when you're, when it all kind of dies down, how do you sit with yourself? That's something I could see in the profession being a bit more challenging. It's like when all the riffraff goes away, and that's probably where Kermit helps, because then Kermit never goes away. So Kermit's with you. And I know on one of my posts on Instagram, you told me that you have panic attacks, because I have panic attacks too, and he helps with that, right?
Yeah, Yeah, those started coming around actually. Well, they got really bad about 6 months ago. There was a point where I was driving on the highway at night after doing a death call, and it was somebody my age I picked up at the hospital, and she just dropped dead. I mean, they didn't know why. I mean, I know why now, but it can happen to any of us. And
Can you
I
share
was,
why? I'm curious.
she had a stroke. So, I
Oh my
mean, just
goodness.
threw a clot and had a stroke at the
At
age of
40?
42. 42.
42.
Yeah.
Shit.
And she was healthy. That's the thing. I'm overweight. I mean, I know where my weaknesses are, but this was a healthy, fit young woman. I think 42 is young.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but you at the same time though, to like, I don't want to to the defense of people, I hear the word healthy thrown around so much, but you never know. A
yeah,
physical appearance doesn't necessarily mean healthy insides, because you can be,
yeah,
still eating. You can have a great metabolism and you may not show that you eat unhealthy, but it's all about the inside. So I mean, you just never know. Also,
hmm,
it's like you can have somebody, like I've heard stories of like these athletes that run marathons and apparently eat really good and clean, dropping dead at 29 from some, undiagnosed heart thing. So that certainly happens, but it's scary.
yeah,
It freaks me out. That's for damn sure.
yeah,
So yeah,
for sure.
I, it's, it's a really interesting profession. What do you think we can do to better educate people besides having these conversations? I'm envisioning more like children, or starting these conversations younger. Like, do you have any advice on how? Because I've always thought about, because I've had these weird thoughts around death when I was really young, and my parents didn't really know what to say, at the time. And so,
Yeah,
like, do you see a lot of kids? Do you talk to kids? Do you have any recommendations of how you can talk to kids around this and not make it so scary?
yeah. It is when I get to go speak at schools. Um, Career day at elementary schools is phenomenal because they're excited about the dog, but then they get excited about death. Kids will ask you the darndest things, and it's phenomenal how on point they are about some of this stuff.
And these are young
Um,
kids.
I think having yeah, these are elementary school kids, like up to fifth grade, that blow my mind every time I get the opportunity to go talk to them. They learn their fear from their community or their tribe or their parents. So what that says
Yes.
to me right
Oh,
now is either these conversations aren't happening at home, and they're coming up with their own great brilliant ideas, or they have really good parents that are actually talking about these things. And part of the facilitation is through our pet death.
I see. Well,
So,
that's,
like,
I
did you
mean,
have
that, but I
yeah,
want to get into the pet death. But before we go there, it speaks so much to conditioning. You know, I, I,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
I got into this conversation in my last podcast. We kind of dipped into politics a little bit, and we were talking about racism, and it got me thinking about racism. And I mean, I, it's like, as a young child, I mean, I don't want to go into racism here, but I'm using this as an example. It's like, as a young child, you don't see, like, personally, my unconditioned consciousness never saw color or gender. It was like, you're just a fellow individual. Like, these
yeah,
are their people. So a lot of these things are learned, is what I'm going for. And then with death, I'm thinking about these kids and this pure consciousness. I feel like it would actually be easier to have a conversation with a young child about something like this, as long as you do it in the right way, because they're so fresh and they're so pure, and they don't have these preconceived or conditioned thoughts and fears around it. They're just like purely curious. What is this? What happens when I die?
yeah.
Like
The biggest pitfall that I've seen in the past, which thankfully doesn't happen as often, is people telling them they're just sleeping. How horrific is that? Oh, I'm going to go to sleep tonight and I'm not going to
wait,
wake
people
up
do what? I
because
missed
so and
that.
so is just sleeping. They tell children that the dead are just sleeping.
Oh
Oh, grandma's
gosh,
just
I think
sleeping.
my parents. No, I don't know if my I
Yeah.
don't think my parents told me that, but I feel like I've heard that before. They're just sleeping. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
that's terrifying because then the kid's never gonna want to go to sleep again.
right.
It's like I'm
Well,
never
but
gonna
you just
wake up.
did.
I don't want to go to sleep ever again.
Right,
That's the birth of an
right.
insomniac right there.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
man.
then I also remember my grandmother making me uh, say a poem every night before bed that didn't help either, like something
Oh my
about
gosh,
if
is
I
that the
die before I
before I
wake.
lay my head down to
Ah,
sleep, I pray. Oh God, I hated that. I hated that shit. I don't know that my parents ever like made me do that, but I feel like I've heard that because I was actually I went to a Catholic school and then we kind
uh-huh,
of naturally transitioned to Christian. I mean, I'm not religious now, but
uh-huh.
that's just kind of how I was raised. And oh my gosh, that poem scared the hell out of me. I was like this is
Right.
supposed to. And I remember there being so much shame around it because I was like, I think
Uh-huh.
this is supposed to make me feel peaceful, but I
Uh-huh.
don't feel peaceful. I am
No.
scared as shit right now because I don't want to go to sleep.
Yeah. Thanks, Grandma.
Oh gosh, I know. It's the
Uh,
conditioning. Gosh, that's why I'm so fucking terrified to have children because I'm scared because there's so many ways that you can literally fuck up a consciousness.
oh yeah, for
And it
sure.
I think it just speaks to like taking care of yourself as an individual because kids, I
Uh,
heard some quote like kids learn more from what you do than what you say. You know, if how you live your
yeah.
life, your principles and everything, how you do everything, a kid is going to just soak that up so much easier and faster um and better than simply you telling them, you know, what to do because, you know, a lot of times especially kids that are young don't really understand words. You know, they understand actions and feelings and body language and tone way before they understand, you know, more
Yeah.
complex words and statements. So into pet
Right.
care now. um I actually I read your little excerpt on that you sent to me on pet care, and I think it's very interesting because I'm looking at it right now. You said you feel like through the participation in the death care of our pets, we can have hopes of having more comfort in the idea of caring for our humans. And that's really
Right.
cool because it's kind of like a way to practice, if you will, because obviously pets live way,
Yeah.
you know, in a perfect world, pets live um, don't live as long as we do, even though that sucks. I really wish that they lived longer, but they don't.
Right.
And so it's a way to kind of practice and understand the options you have there and think about it, you know, before your pet dies. And what are the differences? Is there a lot of difference between pet care and human care after death?
Well, it depends on where the pet dies. Something that I'm trying to incorporate, and other professionals that are progressive like me are trying to do is allow family members to have that space with their dead, with their pet. I've facilitated taking pets from the vet to the home for a vigil with my own cat when her time came, but she was years before Kermit. I had a vet come to the home to euthanize her. Like, and she died in my arms, and then she stayed in her bed overnight where the dog could come and see and recognize that she was gone, and the other cat in the house that was my other roommates could come, and then a few friends came by that had known her, and it gave me peace to be there with her dead body and help me kind of accept it, because throughout the night I could still reach out and touch her and recognize that she was dead, but that I still had that time with her. And the very next morning I drove her body out to the burial park and buried her. Um, so like giving families that kind of ending with their loved pets, I think is important. Unfortunately, what I've discovered is that our vets have contracts and agreements with flame crematory retorts sometime. And they don't even know that water cremation exists in all 50 states for
Oh, it
pets.
does.
Um,
That's cool. That's good to know.
yeah, yeah. So, like here in Austin, I refer people to Eternal Waters Aquamation. And then in Seattle, some good friends of mine own Resting Waters Aquamation. So there are places everywhere. Just do the Googles. But these facilities are also incorporating, visitation time with your pet at their place. They have viewing rooms or sitting rooms, where there may be candles in the room and the family can come in and be with that animal before they leave and kind of have some time if they're not comfortable doing it in their own home. Um, Even with a goldfish, before you flush him down the toilet, say a beautiful word, thanks, Goldie, for
Mm-hmm.
swimming around all the time. It's just
Yeah.
different things like that where we can then start to incorporate our own ritual and what brings us comfort. There is no right or wrong. And we can start practicing this and getting comfortable with it in the care of our pets.
Well, I think
So
a lot of people, you said it right there. I think a lot of people think that there is a right or wrong way to do things. Like they have to do it a certain way, or they just have to make this call. And another interesting little difference with the pets versus humans is you have the option for euthanasia. And I've heard some weird stories about like, I mean, I know that, and I don't know. I mean, vets have a lot of patients or whatever, but I've heard stories of like euthanasia being like recommended way too soon by certain vets, and then it's like people have taken their pets away and actually found different cures for them. And like you're saying, vets have certain relationships with these like flamatories or what you called them, and I just wonder if there's some shit going on behind the scenes there. And I don't think it's true for all vets. I think there are some people with good intentions, but
yeah,
this is a different topic, but like with the oncology industry, some doctors or a lot of doctors get a cut from prescribing the chemotherapy. It's kind of a weird
yeah,
process. So
it's
with
sick
vets, I had no idea that they had a relationship with the flamatories. That's kind of weird to me.
sometimes. Um, and then, as some progressive vets, maybe like in the Washington area, are getting educated on this option, they're giving their families more choices. But here in Texas and everywhere else, we're still fighting to get the knowledge out there to the vets that this is a choice that they can give their families. So we're really having to educate the consumer first. You do not have to leave your pet at the vet. There are other options. You can take your pet home. You can have more involvement. It's just like when a person dies and you call the first funeral home on the list, don't wait until the death has happened to have a plan. Start. Every life ends in death. So schedule a conversation once a year or every 5 years to discuss it, whether it's for Fido or if it's for Aunt Franny.
Well, this speaks to the just the kind of herd mentality of, I mean, I myself haven't even, it's so easy to just be like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm
Yeah.
supposed to do because everybody else does it. And to think outside the box, but it's like people need to know that they have other options. But how, I mean, this is a great platform, but how do you get this in the minds of people? It's like, I am feeling your passion and I want to spread this awareness and education to more people. And I can do that to certainly my community and my little tribe. But I just want, it's like, do you have any ideas on a mass scale how to get this knowledge around? Like what sort of campaigning have you been doing for this? I know you talk about the water cremation, but is there anything else, like any other ideas? Like I guess just
Um,
talking about it.
there's kind of a movement happening. Um, they've dubbed it the death positive movement because back in the 70s when they started talking about sex, they called it the sex positive movement. So there is a little, cult following that's growing, that kind of stems out of participatory things, like interviews and writing and making noise. That's really the only way I know to do it because there's not funds out there to advertise on a mass scale. So it's just like we have to sow those seeds and hope that they blossom.
Yeah, and like we talked about
Oh
earlier,
God, you
it's just
froze. Here you are.
just transitioning, right, from generation to generation. It's like the older generation is just stuck, and then
Yeah.
naturally transitioning into a different way of doing things. I mean, like I said, times have changed.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
need to change with them. So you do a lot of traveling, you say? You like to travel?
I did that for the last 2 years. When I went from running a funeral home here in Austin to kind of working for mortuary services while I was figuring my next move out. I went to the Funeral Consumer Alliance conference, the Home Funeral Alliance conference. Went to Florida several times to visit the aquamation machine that was there. Happened to be in Florida when the Parkland shooting happened, and so Kermit and I went down there the Friday after that. We went to Santa Fe shooting after that happened, since it was here in Texas. We were like, here we go again.
Did you guys
We're
just give it? Did
going.
you talk to the
Um,
school or
we went
survivors?
to Seattle a couple of times in the last 2 years. We just were a presence. I felt drawn to do something, and so we went. And like for the Parkland shooting, we sat out in the courtyard where everybody was, and they had all the little crosses set up, and people just came by and would sit and talk amongst themselves and pet the dog. It was kind of just being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then with Sutherland Springs was kind of the same. Just have him there as a presence. It made me feel good to be able to provide something, because a lot of us wonder, what can we do to help? And that was what I, felt comfortable providing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, sorry. I didn't know if I interrupted you because you were kind of breaking up, so
oh,
I didn't want to. I'm not sure. It's a little lagged. But you said
uh,
you have a goal to travel to all 50 states before you die. That's on your bucket list.
that's with Kermit. Yes, I'd like Kermit to go to all 50 states before he dies. I'd like to just get out of the United States. I don't have a passport, and I've never traveled outside the US. Um, I would very much like to do that.
I know. I want to do some travel too. It's daunting though. It's daunting to think about
Yeah.
going to different just even the travel time. Like even
Oh,
simply
yeah, and the
like to go
money.
to Asia, the money and just the thought of like I see there's like this cool little island. I think it's off the coast of Africa called the Maldives.
Uh-huh.
And a coworker went there, but he said, "Oh my gosh," he was like, "It was something crazy, like 30 something hours one way of flight time." And I'm just like between all the different
Uh,
flights that he had to take, because it's like this little tiny island, and I'm just like, "Fuck, that is a commitment.
yeah,
Like you
no.
have to have a strong why. You really need to want to go to that damn island in the middle of the ocean to want to travel that long."
Right.
Um, well, I think we talked about a lot of cool things today. Is there anything else that we may have not touched upon that you think is very important for people to know, or maybe you can kind of speak on what your mission is, what you want to educate people on overall, and yeah.
Well, um, overall, I just want people to know that they have a choice. I don't care if you choose me to be your mortician at the end. I just want to know that you knew your options and taken advantage of. One thing to know, there is a huge change happening in death. The people that I see coming out of mortuary school give me so much hope. They're diverse. It's not just white men that have inherited the business from dad. Like when I first went to mortuary school, it's broad. All different cultures are getting involved. The hard thing is them getting out of school and getting jobs in their respective career, because we still have these staunchy old people hanging around tamping stuff down. And my message to those people that are considering mortuary school or are in it or have completed it and just didn't get to get a job is, don't give up. You can partner with the Funeral Consumer Alliance and educate your community on different options that are out there. You can become an advocate with the knowledge that you've gained from mortuary school. If they don't accept you into the career to do it, make your own path. And you don't have to have a license to take care of dead pets. So
That's cool to know. Yeah, because the mortuary
yeah,
school, I would think, kind of funnels you into that old school system. Does
it
it
does.
not?
It
It
does.
does? Okay.
Many of them are owned by other companies in the industry. Like one of them used to be owned by a chemical company that makes the embalming fluid and is now owned by a manufacturer of vaults. You know, more things to sell you. So
See,
we're going
oh
to talk all about
man,
embalming.
that is
Yeah,
so
but there are
frustrating because
community colleges out there.
it's just like the medical schools being subsidized by pharmaceutical companies. It's like the
Yeah,
same damn thing. It's like
yeah,
they're
right on a
funneling
smaller scale.
these doctors into over prescribing medication because that's what they're taught in medical school. Like they
Yeah,
can't help it. They don't know another way. It's aligned with what I'm hearing with the mortuary school. It's like, how do you break the cycle if the education is what is creating the problem?
yeah.
And like you said, it's great becoming an advocate. You don't need a license to take care, you said, of dead pets. Like there's so many ways to get
No,
involved and spread this knowledge without having to go through the stuffy education process. I actually have a viewer that commented, well, let's be real, it's my mom, but she wants to hear about the rest of your story about your panic attack. If you want to,
oh, okay, we'll go back to that. Yeah, I was going down the road and I couldn't get a solid breath in, and it was I felt a recurring pain in my chest. And I was like, I'm gonna have a heart attack before I even get back to the mortuary with the body in the back of the van. So I was calling a friend of mine, like, if something happens to me, you have to know to get Kermit to this other friend because she'll take care of him. And I was calling my boss, like, if you show up in the morning and I'm dead at the table, do not embalm me. Don't let that happen. I mean, but I was serious and I was shaken, and I felt like people needed to know that right now as I was driving down the highway from picking up this lady at the hospital. So
I see. So you
yeah.
had so I see what happened. You had a panic attack. And so in a moment of panic, you were trying to tell people like, if I die, please, like you shouldn't have to do that in a moment of panic, right? It's like you should, like, the message is you should be able
Right.
to think about these things before an emergency or before you're on your deathbed, like you have 24 hours to live. Oh shit, now what do I want to happen to me? So it was that panic attack
Right.
that got you to really start to think about, you know, your after. Was it then that you started to think about what you wanted to happen to you after you died, or you already knew, you just had never communicated it?
Mm-mm. I always knew, I just never got on the ball about communicating it, and it came down to, like, the panic attacks that I would have after that would really feel like my chest was done. Like things would narrow. Just whenever I would have an episode, and thankfully it was really intense for like a couple of months, but things have leveled out since then. So I still
So
take medication, and I have my dog for that, but we're moving forward.
panic attacks are horrible. They're horrible. It is a
Yeah.
feeling that you cannot. And I've had so many of them, and I've done a lot of work. I speak out on them a lot and a lot on mental health. I've done a lot of work around them, trying to ground
Yeah.
myself during them. Lots of experimentation, but it is a feeling that I still cannot get used to. I mean,
Yeah.
as many times as I've had them, you literally feel like you are dying, like it is your last moments, you're going crazy, your body is just out of control. It is horrible. For anybody that experiences them, man, it's hard. It is really hard. Was that the first one you ever had, or was that just one that sticks
That
out in
was
your
the
mind?
most that was the greatest, the biggest one I had. I've had anxiety issues, um, probably for the last 4 years, um, where like you get the sweats, you can't enunciate what you want to say. Um,
Oh, you
you
can't even
mean to
sp-
say shovel, but you say
I can't even
spoon.
speak. Like when I'm having one, when my
Yeah.
husband or someone's trying to talk to me, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't hear you. I can't, like, it almost sounds like someone is speaking another language to you. And not that the
Mhm.
words sound different, but your brain can't comprehend what's going on because you're in so much panic. It's almost like you have a clear head, but a completely stuffed head at the same time. It's a weird sensation.
Yeah, it's like you know what you're doing, but you can't really.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
awful. Totally awful. Well, thank you for sharing the rest of that story. I appreciate that because I'm always into talking about panic because that shit, ugh, like, ugh, have
I can
some
laugh
intense stories with
about
panic
it
attacks.
now, but
What's
yeah.
that? Oh, no, I don't know if you said something. I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I said,
it cut out a little bit again. Well, I I think we talked about some great things. I kind of want to get into now what you're doing, where people can find you, things that projects that you're working on. I saw that you're writing a book, which is awesome. I have a goal of writing a book too. You're currently being filmed for a documentary, so maybe you can
uh-huh.
speak some more on that. And just I just got to say before we sign off, you have a really impressive list of accomplishments, just like this National Geographic Explorers documentary, all these different appearances you've made, other podcasts
Thanks.
you've done. You've shown up so much in the news and with Kermit, and I'm sure people can find your list of accomplishments somewhere online. If not, I'm happy to write them out. But it's like your passion for this clearly shows through, and it's very refreshing to see somebody
Thanks.
passionate about something. I just don't think we have enough of that. So, yeah, if you want to speak on any of that and just what you're doing, where people can find you, go for it.
Well, my Instagram is the most active. So at mod_mortician. I do a lot of stuff on the story. So you see behind the scenes, like what happens when I pick up a body at a hospital, or, what does the crematory look like? I'm calling him, but I think he's sleeping. But anyway, um, where was I going with that?
And I think
Oh yeah,
you broke up a little bit. So if listeners can hear me, her Instagram is it's mod mortician,
mod underscore.
mod underscore mortician. And you do a lot of stuff on stories. So you can see, you do a lot of like the real time death care. So people can follow you there. A lot of stuff with Kermit, right on there. So
Yeah,
that's what I've seen to be your most active platform.
yeah. Then I also have a patron account for the next level kind of things. If people follow the patron, they get access to a different Instagram, and money that I make through that goes back into Kermit and I doing things in the community. Um, Beyond that, there's Facebook. Uh, the documentary is done filming, as far as I know. I'm hoping he'll come back and like have the happy ending because self. So, um, yeah, he's piecing that together with all my old Instagram footage from the last 2 years, and I'm going to be uploading that to YouTube as soon as I figure out how to edit and all of that. So that's my project over the next 2 weeks, is to get my old Instagrams into story form on the YouTube that I have, which is The Modern Mortician. And then, yeah, so Google Kermit the Therapy Dog, Texas, or The Modern Mortician, and you're sure to find me.
Absolutely. I love it. And you said you're on Etsy too, right?
Yeah, we have an Etsy store, and that's another alternative method we use to raise extra funds to do stuff in the community with the doggo.
Very cool. I'm
Yeah,
gonna put all your links in the description box. So
thanks.
even if people don't, if it's too hard to type into Google for people,
Right.
they can just click a link. Everything's about convenience these days. But yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming on here and educating me and everybody listening about death. I think it's something that absolutely now I'm convinced that we need to talk way more about it. It doesn't always need to be terrifying or scary or weird or uncomfortable. We can
Yeah.
actually have conversations about it. And is there any people always freak out when I say this, but is there any like last word or like not last words, of course, any last words you have for people? No parting words for viewers, things you want people to know or leave with, anything high level?
It's okay to decay.
Ah, I love the shirt. It's okay to decay. I love it. Wow. I mean, that's like, I think I always ask people to do that. And that's probably like the best, just shortest, simple piece of advice. It's like, kind of look at it in a bigger picture. It's like, it's okay to decay. Like, it's okay. If you become okay with your death, if you accept it, if you literally live by your shirt, it's okay to decay, then it takes so much pressure off. And maybe we can actually learn to live life, right?
Right. Exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you, Melissa. As weird as it sounds, I think we've been talking this whole time, and I don't even think I ever introduced your name, or maybe I did in the
Yeah,
beginning.
you
I did. Okay, cool. This is just my this is my second guessing myself. It's constantly on repeat in my mind. So awesome. Well, I'm gonna go off live soon. You and I can still keep talking, but I again appreciate your time. Amazing conversation, and I'm sure I'm gonna have you on for another episode when things change in the industry or develop. I want to stay up to date, and I'm sure people do as well. So thank you again, Melissa.
Thank you.
All right, we are going off live in 3, 2.